Welcome to video 22 of Gamer to Game Developer Series 1, and in this video we'll implement player stats. So to have customizable player stats, we'll edit 5 scripts, so the spawn script, various scripts attached to the player, so energy, resource, health and damage, and crouching, and then we will attach the player stat script, which is our new script, to the game manager, and then discuss how it works. So this is basically how our attribute selection is going to work. So previously you'll remember that our spawn script is responsible for displaying the join red team button and the blue team button as well. Now we're going to expand it to include much more information and allow the player to be able to select their stats. Now it's still the responsibility of the spawn script to display this window, but to generate all of this portion, all the new stuff, it is the player stat script that is doing it. So the spawn script is going to call upon a function inside the player stat script and use that to draw this window, and the player can click the buttons and select their stats. How the attribute system works is that if the player presses the plus button, then their health will increase by 10, it would become 110, and they can't increase it beyond 200. And they have a number of attribute points available to them, and that is 37 points. So that 37 points can be allocated across the various attributes however the player wants. So it's supposed to be customizable. Now the scripts on the player, these scripts, the player resource, health and damage, etc., they access the player stats script to see what those chosen values are. So what is the selected health, what is energy, resource, and these are then defined as the maximums, and they are saved to player prefs as well. So from them, these are now our new base value. So previously in the scripts you would have remembered that we've set the base resource and energy as 100. Well, that is no more now. Now it's going to be the base energy is equal to whatever the max energy is, so whatever the player has set it as. Okay, so we'll see this implemented. Let's go ahead and carry out our very first step, which is to update the spawn script. Our update to the spawn script will be really simple, so let's open it up, expand the summary, and we'll add a new comment inside, and that'll be this script accesses the player stats script, so the player stats script, our new script, to make use of the stats function. So that's a new function inside of that script. It's a public function which other scripts can access, and you'll see it in the last step. So make use of the stats function in allowing the player to choose their stats. Okay, and the change is really simple. So going down to the join team window function right here, which is responsible for drawing that window that allows us to choose our team. Now we're going to just expand what it can do by calling upon that function in the player stats script. So we'll run right here the comment, run the stats function from the player stats script. Game object, game manager, which is what we're going to attach the player stats script to, is equal to gameObject.find, and that is game manager. Then we'll access the player stats script, so player stats stat script is equal to game manager dot get component player stats. And finally we'll run the function, so stat script dot stats, which is our public function in there, and that's it. Okay, so that is it for the spawn script. I'll save that. And when we jump over to that script in the last step, then you'll see what this is doing. But I can briefly tell you that at the moment our function looks nice and simple. There's these two buttons that are drawn that you can see here, the join blue team, the join red team, or the respawn button if the player is destroyed. Now what this bit here is, it's going to run a whole heap of code in another script that also has GUI, like this sort of GUI code in it that draws that window that we saw in the PowerPoint slide just earlier. Alright, but that'll be for later. And I might just remove these two functions here, start and update, since it doesn't look like we're going to use them. Alright, and I'll just save that and then jump to the next step. We're on to our second step, which is to update the player energy script. Our edit to the player energy script will also be pretty simple. So let's expand the summary and put in there this script accesses the player stats script to determine what the player's max energy is. And we'll just put more code into the start function. So at the moment it says their base energy is equal to 100. Well, that really isn't relevant anymore because of the new code that we're about to put in, which is, I'll just first write the comment, access the player stats script to determine the player's max energy. This will be their base energy. And I'll just copy paste that bit of code, this one here, where we're accessing that stat script, the player stat script. I'll just copy paste that, much quicker. Alright. And I just have another line to add, which is base energy is equal to stat script dot max energy. Okay, and that is it. I'll save it. That's all we needed to do for our player energy script, and we're going to do very similar thing for the player resource script. Our third quick step will be to update the player resource script. Let's open up the player resource script and do pretty much exactly the same thing that we did in the player energy script. I'll even copy the comments. So I'll just copy this bit here. And say the script accesses the player stats script to determine what the player's max resource is. Okay, and I'll even just copy this portion right here as well from the start function of the player energy script and take it directly into the resource script. Okay, and I'll just change the comment slightly. Access the player stats script to determine the player's max resource. And this will be their base resource. And once again here, where we have base energy, I'll change that to base resource. And from max energy, it'll now be max resource. Okay, so that is it. I'll save it and move on to the next step. Now we'll update the health and damage script. Let's open up the health and damage script, and we'll just have slightly more to do in this script than the others. We'll just add a new comment that this script accesses the player stats script to determine the player's max health. And I might just put that up above. Just to keep everything in order. Alright, we'll add a new RPC. So scroll all the way down, and we can just add a new RPC. And I'll just put it right here. Okay, so RPC, and that's going to be a void update my max health everywhere. And it's going to require float health. So it's going to require a float. And all it is going to be is max health is going to equal health. So once the player spawns, then what we'll do is that their max health across the network will be set to whatever this player has chosen it as. So that way that health bar that's displayed over the player's head and their health in everyone else's game will be correct. Okay, so let's scroll back up to the start function. And now we're going to expand it and add more code inside. So what I'll do is, right after the bit where we have a reference to the parent game object, we will write a new comment and a bit of new code. So right here, access the player stats script and obtain the max health value. This is used to set max health, current health, and previous health in this health and damage script across the network. So in this health and damage script across the network. All right. So now we'll write here if, so it should only run in our game instance. So we don't need all the other players in the game instance who are not our player character to run this bit of code. It should only run on our character so that we control it across the network. So if network view dot isMine is true, then we simply access that game manager. So I can just copy paste that once again. So copy paste. Okay. So now we have the player stats reference right there. So now we'll say max health is equal to stat script dot max health. Okay. And at the same time, I'll set my health, which is our current health, to max health. So that's what the player starts as. So that way they don't start at 100. Okay, and then we will send out 3 RPCs so that we make sure that the max health is correct across the network and this player's current health is correctly represented across the network, since the current health is whatever that max health is, since this is the player starting up. Okay, so network view dot RPC, and that RPC is update my max health everywhere. So I'll just go down and just copy that name and make it easier than typing it out. And I'll send it to RPC mode dot others buffered so that new players will also get the correct max health value for our player. And the value to send is max health. Okay, so that was the first RPC. Now we have another 2. So network view dot RPC. The next one is update my current health everywhere. So we can just copy from here, update my current health everywhere. Paste that in. send it to just others, rpc mode.others, and just supply my health, so our current health, just simple. So this is so that for all the other players who are already in the game, let's say we're joining into a game, there are players already there, that way we'll give them our correct current health value, which when we start is our max health, and we don't need to buffer it because that's what we'll use the previous health value in the next RPC. We'll take care of that with the next RPC. So network view.rpc, and this one is update my health record everywhere. So let's go get a, yep, that's it right down here. So update my health record everywhere. I'll just copy this and paste it in. And this one is rpc mode dot all buffered, so that new players get this correct previous health value as well. And my health is the value to supply. Alright, and that is it. So we've updated our health and damage script. So now we can actually go onwards to, I'll just fix that right there. Okay, so now we can move on to the next step. Our fifth step will be to update the crouching script. Let's open up the crouching script and make some simple additions. So in the summary, I'll add that this script accesses, well, why not, let's just copy from here, it's the same sort of thing. So this script accesses the player stats script to determine what the player's max speed is. So I'll put their max movement speed. And then we'll go over to the start function. So at the beginning of it, we'll add a new little bit of code. So the comment is set the player's normal speed on spawning. And for that, once again, we can just copy paste code from another script. So access the game manager, access the player stat script, and then set our normal speed to be equal to stat script dot max speed. Okay, and that is it. So now our normal movement speed, you can see here, you remember the forward speed, backwards and sideways speed are all set to the normal speed, and that's going to be whatever the maximum speed is. Okay, so that's it for the crouching script. Now we'll move on to the next step. We're on to our last step, which is to build and run the game and discuss the player stats script. Now just before we go ahead and build and run the game, I just remembered that there is one other small thing that I forgot to change in the spawn script, and that's simply the window height. So instead of 100, I'll change it to 370. Okay, so now we can jump back to Unity, and now I'll select the game manager and drop in our player stats script. And let's build and run the game. I'll set up my server in the editor, and I'll go back here, connect. Okay, there we go. And there's our attribute selection window, plus the ability to join a team. Now I just changed that window height because otherwise it would have been too low. The window would have been all pushed down. So I've just bumped it back up to a sensible location on the screen. Okay, so it's really simple how it works. You can see here attribute points not allocated, 8 points. Our health is 100, energy is 100, resources 100. I can increase our health and I can increase it up to the maximum. Like I could decrease energy and keep putting points towards health. And once it hits 200, it can't go anymore despite us having more points. And I can increase speed, etc. So this gives us some customizability over what our player should be like we can make our player slower. Not too much point in that, I guess, unless we're trying to maximize maybe our resource. Okay, so I should open up the script. Well, let me just connect. So we have 140 health and resource right here. So if I join the game, we can see down here in the lower right that we have 140 health and 160 resource. Okay, I'll disconnect and I'll hit connect again. Okay, and you can see that it remembers our settings from last time because they're saved to player prefs. Now I'll go ahead and open up the player stats script. Let me try and put these two windows together. Okay. And let's go over this player stats script. So as you already know, it's attached to the game manager and it's accessed by a whole bunch of scripts. Now there are a lot of variables inside, some for the GUI controls like label height and width and button width. You can see them there. So that's the button width. It has its height and width are both button width. The label has that width and height of 40. So all that is why it looks nicely spaced out. Then we move on and you can see these variables here, a health multiplier, energy multiplier. Now this multiplier is times by the attribute. So each point allocated, so you remember, let me just put minus there, point. Okay, so you can see 1 point there. So what you can see straight away is that each attribute allocated to health gives 10 health. So the multiplier is 10. So if I give 3 points to health, I get 30 points. And in the case of speed, there's no multiplication, so each point is directly 1 point of speed. So it's just a way to give different weights to each of the attributes. So you can see like resource is equal to 20. Since resource, the cost of using it is generally higher when it comes to construction and later with the rockets. Okay, our total stat points available to us is 37. We have this variable stat points left. You'll see what's done with that later. Then we have here health stat, energy stat, a bunch of floats. We have some max stat points, so the max attribute points for each attribute. That's what you can see here displayed on the right side. So like max resource stat is 20, so 20 times 20 is 400, so a max of 400. And then we also have some minimum, so we can't go below 10 health or 10 energy or 20 resource or 3 speed. Like you could see here, we can click down to go reduce our speed, but we can't go less than 3. So that's what we're using those variables for. Then we have some default settings as well in case the player prefs are empty, which it will be when you play for the first time, or if a change has been made and the stat points don't add up. So say someone changes it to 35 stat points or 40 or whatever, it won't add up anymore and it'll need to reset to the default rather than going with what's here. So like if the max, especially if the max settings are changed, like let's say the player had taken 200 health, but then later in the code we change it to 15, then we don't want 20 being brought back from player prefs. We just want to have the maximum health. So well, our maximum health has been limited, so it's no longer 200, and as such we should just set it to the default health, and the player can then set it to whatever the max health is. Okay, and then some variables for capturing the max health, energy, resource, and speed. This is what those other scripts were looking at, these variables right here. And then we have a bunch of variables that are used to capture the GUI style. So in our start function, we go ahead and we retrieve our various stats from player prefs. So you can see here that we're trying to retrieve the health stat. But if the health stat here is 0, After trying to retrieve it, then just set it to the default health stat. So really simple. So that's what they're all doing here. Then next we just simply set the font style for the labels and stuff. So you can see here we're setting alignment for this one. For other ones it's just color. Yeah, it's all middle left alignment and mostly just about the color. Okay. Now we move on to the more important part, which is the actual function itself. This is the stats function that you recall was being called by the by the spawn script. So I'll just jump there. So in the join team window function, you recall, here we go, join team window, and we just call that function. And when we run this function, all of this code inside is being run. And that is also, you can see here a lot of GUI code. This is what's causing all of these new GUI items to be displayed. So let's quickly go over it. So here we're doing the calculation to see what the max health is. Based on the stats and the health multiplier, it's calculated every GUI frame, every single time that the onGUI function goes. And then we just simply have here some checks that, ensure that the stat can't be greater than the max stat, which makes sense. So we just set it back down to the max stat. So that's why when we keep pressing the plus button, we can't go beyond the max stat. Okay, now here's the bit where we reset the stat if the total number of stat points is greater than the limit. So if we change this total number of stat points to say like 33, then of course that means this condition won't be true. Well, it will be true. And in that case, then the health stat, etc., they all need to be set to the defaults. Okay, now once we've done all those calculations there or checks, then we start implementing the GUI code. So we just use a box, and within it we have these attribute points not allocated. You can see that right there. It's the plain style, which has white text, and then we end the horizontal. So that is that horizontal right there, that box enclosing that label, those two labels. Okay, and then we move on to the next box, GUI.horizontal, and this one is for the health attribute that you can see. So you can see that there's a GUI label health. It's the health style. It's got a width of the label width and that height of label height, which was 40. Then the next label, which is the max health itself, which we had just calculated above. It's been converted to a string, and you see that there. Next, we have the plus and minus button. So you can see here if GUI layout.button, the plus, if it's clicked, then what we do is we run this condition. We check that if the health stat is less than the max health stat and stat point left is greater than 0, so there are still points here available to us, then that means the health stat can be increased by 1. So every time we increase that, we've applied an attribute point to that. So at the moment, say here it's 12 points allocated. If we press plus, it's now 13 points allocated to there. Okay, and then we set that in our player prefs. So we say player prefs dot set float health stat and the value, which is health stat. And it's very similar for the minus button now. Now we have the bit of code for the GUI layout.button minus symbol. Of course, it's width and height to get that square shape. And quite simply, if the player's health stat is not less than the minimum, so the minimum was 1 point, then in that case, like let's say it's 13 right now. So if they click minus, it'll just subtract 1, it'll become 12, and that will then be saved to the player prefs. And after that, we just simply draw this label here, which has max plus that max health stat times the health multiplier. So that's what gives us 200, and convert it to a string. And we just give it a width and a height. And then we end the horizontal. So we can see that horizontal is finished, that box. And then we begin another horizontal for the energy attribute, then another one for the resource, and then another for the speed. And you can see that as we scroll down. So it looks like a lot of code. It's typical with the sort of GUI code. It looks really daunting, but it's actually, when you have to type it out for yourself, it's pretty simple actually. It's just a lot of written stuff there. So just by having some simple comments, it helps you remember what that whole block of code written there is all about. It really is quite simple, as you could just see right now. So each of them are exactly the same. They're doing the exact same thing, just for the different attributes. Okay, so that is it for explaining the player stat script. And as I mentioned, all of this code, I'll just point out that it was a public function. So this is the main thing. It's a public function. That's why the spawn script is able to see it and run it. And since the spawn script runs it in its own GUI code, we're able to use the same window. We don't need to use another separate window for this script here. We can just use the same window. So you could have many scripts and you just call the functions in those scripts to build your own window. So you could have pretty complicated windows with all sorts of buttons and settings with it. It's pretty neat, actually, what you can do. Okay, so that's it for what we're supposed to look at. So really simple. I can just change, I can join a team. You can see that what I chose has been applied. I can disconnect, connect, and it's all still there, which is great. All right, so I can just close that down, and we've reached the end of this video. So it's quite simple what we've achieved, but pretty powerful in that you can use the same system that you've seen here to make up whatever stats or attributes that you want and implement them in your game. Alright, so that's it for this video. Our next video is going to be pretty interesting. It's going to be the particle cannon. So in that, we'll use the particle cannon and its bullets, the particles themselves, will be applying damage. Okay, but that's for the next video. So thanks for watching and see you in the next video.